Hello, my name is April Rovero, and I am the Executive Director of the National Coalition Against Prescription Drug Abuse. We want to welcome you to our educational interview series. Today, we're going to be interviewing Mark Karandang, who is with the HIDTA organization, and he's an old friend. Not old in terms of age, but definitely in terms of connection. He's a great supporter of our coalition and also the Contra Costa County Meds Coalition. So welcome, Mark, to our interview today. And we are going to have our youth ambassadors conducting our interview today. And so Amina is our lead on this particular interview. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Amina, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Hi, thank you so much for being here with us today. So to start off, could you tell us what HIDTA is and what your role is in preventing access and use of illegal drugs?
Sure thing, Amina. So HIDTA stands for High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area. And, looking at it from a three-layer perspective will probably help out. At the very top layer of our organization is the Executive Office of the President of the United States. And so President Biden has several offices that help him carry his legislative agenda forward. And one of these offices is in charge with leading, coordinating, and developing U.S. drug policy. This is done through the Office of the National Drug Control Policy, which is the second layer of our organization. The last and final layer of our organization is the HIDTA program. And really what HIDTA is a way for law enforcement to investigate, disrupt, and dismantle major drug trafficking organizations. Nationally, we have 33 congressionally approved HIDTA regions, and California is very unique in that we have 4 HIDTA regions. And really, this just highlights how big of a scope of a problem in the state of California is when it comes to drug producing and drug trafficking. My role as the drug intelligence officer is to, facilitate law enforcement's efforts in getting drugs off of our streets and out of our communities, with a secondary role of helping community-based organizations, such as this organization, in strengthening the reduction in demand for drugs. And we really do that by sharing intelligence and information, and being a very, very active law enforcement participant in addressing our community drug problems.
Moving on, we would like to ask you to describe the depth of our nation's substance use disorder and overdose epidemic.
So if I had one word to best describe the depth of our nation's substance use disorder, that one word would probably be dire. Our national drug control problem is dire. I believe it to be the greatest threat to public health and safety. It's funny because I sit in a lot of meetings and attend a lot of conferences with talks about threats to public health and public safety. And in a lot of these meetings, we talk about domestic terrorism, we talk about white nationalism, international terrorism such as Al-Qaeda, and COVID has also been a huge talking point, especially during the last year. But with all those combined, they're not going to come near close to really addressing the greatest threat to public health, which is addiction. No other social issue has killed more Americans than all of our modern wars combined. No other social issues, really impacts every community from Main Street to our inner city streets to rural America with so much impunity. And no other social issue has impacted more generations of Americans and their families than addiction. And to sum it all up, again, it would be dire. Our addiction situation in our country is dire, especially with the amount of overdoses we are experiencing.
Thank you. And we understand that a lot of these overdoses happen because of a substance called fentanyl. So we'd like to ask you to tell us what fentanyl is exactly and how the fentanyl supply chain works.
So fentanyl is the single contributing factor to the most recent spate of opioid-related overdoses. And to understand the problem, one really needs to know what fentanyl is. Fentanyl is a very, very strong analgesic opioid, which was made available since the late 60s, I believe. And fentanyl does have a medical therapeutic purpose. It's a very, very strong pain reliever, really reserved for those suffering from great amounts of pain, such as those recovering from surgery or those suffering from long-term terminal cancer, for example. And so, fentanyl is highly addictive, and fentanyl is made in laboratories. Anybody with very, very basic chemical know-hows and someone who has access to some of the precursor chemicals required to manufacture fentanyl can make fentanyl. And so from a drug trafficking organization perspective, it really is the perfect way to profit off of addiction. Fentanyl is very heavily regulated and controlled within the medical community. Uh, the fentanyl that we're seeing on the news today is illicitly manufactured fentanyl. And these fentanyls are manufactured and produced in somebody's basement, in somebody's drug stash house. Very, very little regulation and oversight. And that is why fentanyl is everywhere, easily accessible and attainable.
And following up on that, so what forms does fentanyl come in?
Predominantly, we're seeing fentanyl in both powdered and pill form. And so, it's a chemical component which can be used to mix in other types of drugs like cocaine, methamphetamines, heroin, marijuana. We're seeing people, smoke fentanyl, inject fentanyl, and inhale fentanyl. So it's pretty diverse in terms of its makeup.
And just to kind of like get across really how powerful this substance is, can you explain kind of how potent it is compared to other drugs such as morphine?
Sure. So fentanyl is 50 to 100 more times stronger than morphine. And so with a drug with that level of potency, we can certainly see why it's highly addictive and deadly at the same time.
So moving on, we want to ask you, what role does fentanyl play in our current overdose epidemic?
What role does fentanyl play in our current overdose epidemic? Fentanyl is essentially feeding our drug appetite problem. There is such a huge appetite for fentanyl, and major drug trafficking organizations are more than happy to supply that appetite. And so, as previously mentioned, fentanyl is everywhere, easily accessible and easily attainable.
So following up on that question, what advice do you have for people who might be tempted to buy any drug through a social media site such as TikTok or even an online pharmacy?
Well, obviously the messaging from the 80s, just say no to drugs, has proven not to be as effective as we want. Some good sound advice outside of trying to stay away from any type of drugs would be to be as safe and precautious as much as possible. I'm by no way means of encouraging people to experiment in drugs. However, if you do go down that path, be safe and responsible. Have other people with you so somebody can call 911. Have Narcan readily available, and just try to limit exposure from these toxic chemicals as much as possible.
So our next question is, how do you believe that the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted both the supply and the demand of illegal opioids and other drugs?
Actually, I was very surprised with the correlation between the last year and a half with COVID and what's happening with our overdoses. Initially, I believed our overdoses were going to decrease. And the reason why is because of constraints to the supply of these illicit narcotics. And so when everything shut down worldwide, we knew that was going to have a detrimental effect to the drug supply into the country. We shut down our borders. I think the flow of traffic from Mexico was really hindered, and so with a negative impact to the supply of drugs, one would assume that overdoses would in turn decrease. Actually, the opposite has happened, and so during this COVID epidemic, we've seen an increased amount of drug-related overdoses, which we have not seen before in terms of magnitude. And so, this leads us to a very difficult conclusion that the supply market is heavily protected from outside disturbances, such as a global pandemic. Drug trafficking organizations to the south no longer require help and assistance from global markets, meaning they're able to produce their own precursor chemicals required to manufacture fentanyl, for example. And lastly, our public health responses have been inadequate in dealing with the drug epidemic because they had to shift their attention and focus to COVID. And so, this level of support really displaced a lot of people. And when you have a lot of people already addicted to drugs, and also having drugs readily available and accessible, this really resulted in an unprecedented amount of overdose cases in our communities, not just in our state, but nationwide as well.
So you've mentioned how easily accessible these drugs are and how they show up in other substances as well. So based off of that, what advice do you have for youth who are looking to turn towards the use of fentanyl or any other sort of illegal opioid or prescription drug?
First and foremost, stay away. Definitely. Understand the harmful effects of experimenting with drugs. That's first and foremost. But again, like I mentioned previously, if you do find yourself in an environment where you want to experiment, or if your friends are experimenting, call 911 for emergency medical. Should an emergency medical situation arise, such as an overdose, get access to Narcan, know what Narcan is, how to use it, know how to do CPR, understand the signs and symptoms of overdoses so you could render aid. One thing about overdoses is, for the most part, overdose fatalities is preventable. And so getting somebody to treatment as soon as overdose events occurs can potentially save a life.
So along with the question that we just asked, what general advice do you have for parents of the youth regarding the opioid epidemic, such as locking certain medicines in a certain cabinet, looking for signs of substance use, and anything similar to that?
Yeah, I have 3 points for parents. So the first point, parents really need to be, they need to understand the threats that may pose harmful to their kids. Understand the threats of opioids, drugs. Understand what is happening out in the communities as well as nationally. And so, we hear about the fentanyl epidemic in the news, but really understand what is driving that threat. The second thing I would offer to parents is, be very, very well versed in some of the applications that their kids are using. Understand how TikTok works, understand how Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat works. I know that can be very, very difficult because, I could only imagine my mom, trying to unlock my phone and trying to figure out the same apps that I use. And I chuckle at that notion. And that's probably gonna be the hardest thing is for parents to get well versed in some of the applications and the technology youth are using today. The third, tip I would offer to parents, I'm a parent myself, is to, um, you know, be an active influence in their child's lives. When kids have a void to fill, they'll fill it with entertaining themselves through the use of social media, for example. Unfortunately, social media has a lot of influence on how kids perceive the world, and this could be both, a negative and a positive. And as much as possible, be active influences in your child's lives. Hopefully it'll prevent them from going down a path of addiction.
So do you have anything else you'd like to share with us?
Um, Probably just one last thing. You all, the three of you are the future, essentially, and you are all in control of your own destiny. Don't let a drug or the itch of experimentation, uh, rob you of your future and control you of your destiny. So, yeah, that's it. Thank you all. Anything else?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on mute. So thank you, Mark. I always appreciate your insight, and your knowledge and your background is just perfect for the work you do. I wanted to just comment, over this past year and a few months, we've all been affected by the COVID situation, and we are really concerned about the mental health impact of the epidemic or pandemic on not just youth, but everybody. And so often people will move over to substances to try to cope with, mental health challenges, anxiety, or whatever. We've been offering mental health first aid to our coalition members, and our youth are going to be able to take advantage of that soon here too. And I just wanted to throw out there that I think it's super important for parents to be tuned in to their kids' mental health. They've got their own personal challenges, but to really tune in, especially during this time frame when things are just not normal. Kids are being, excluded from even classroom settings and the social, opportunities that school itself offers, and on and on. So I just wanted to throw that in. I'm sure you support that thought too. Additionally, having Narcan on hand, I think every parent should have it in their home, just in case. And I just wanted to make sure parents know how to get Narcan. First of all, or our organization, for those who live in California, we can provide it, but even easier, naloxoneforall.org is a website where anybody can go on and just take a quick little test, little training thing, and then they provide just basic information, and 2 Narcan cartridges will be mailed to the address provided. So that would be an add-on to what you've shared. You've clearly stated we need Narcan. And I even understand with fentanyl, it can take more than 2 doses of Narcan to overturn an overdose. So it's really important to have it, and know everybody should call 911 as soon as they recognize an overdose might be, in progress. So any other thoughts connected to that?
Yeah, one other thing, we already mentioned about the importance of calling 911. Another key takeaway to having Narcan available is understand that in the state of California, we have Good Samaritan laws in place. So if you're with somebody who's overdosing, because people are experimenting with drugs, if you call 911 to help save lives, we have laws in place where you will not get in trouble. Real briefly, I'll share with you a very tragic story out of Arizona. A group of friends were experimenting with fentanyl, and one of the friends overdosed from ingesting counterfeit prescription medication, which, unbeknownst to him, had fentanyl in there. My friends didn't know what to do. They were scared to call 911. In Arizona, just like California, has a good Samaritan law. Had they called 911 sooner rather than later, there's a high possibility that that friend would be alive today. And so, calling 911 will not get you in trouble. Get help as soon as possible if you're witnessing somebody overdosing.
Yeah, do you want to just throw out a couple of the most obvious overdose signs that you'd want to share, just so parents or young people watching this video would know kind of what to look for an opioid related overdose?
People die from overdoses because their body stops breathing. When dealing with fentanyl and various other types of drugs, the brain literally forgets to remind itself to breathe. And so what Narcan does is Narcan gets rid of the drug, which makes us forget how to breathe. And so signs and symptoms of somebody overdosing is number one, loss of consciousness, not breathing, turning blue, not being responsive, and actions such as Narcan administration, calling 911, CPR. We've all learned CPR in health classes. Will really help. Keep death away as far as possible for that very few precious moments that you have.
Yeah, and every minute counts when it comes to somebody not breathing and potential brain damage there. So you may survive an overdose and have some major problems after. So time is really, really important. Okay, well, is there anything else, Mark, you can think of? Any of our youth ambassadors have any other questions or thoughts you want to add to the mix here?
I saw a note about social media and social media's role in our drug epidemic. I just wanted to make a point that social media can essentially play two roles, right? And so there's both good and bad with social media and advertisement. The bad part about it is, with social media, it may attract a certain, viewpoint towards drugs, as well as make drugs more easily accessible. There's a huge concern within the law enforcement community where apps such as Snapchats and TikTok and Instagram are a venue for folks to be able to seek out drugs. Drug dealers are advertising some of their supply on social media, which makes it super easy for somebody to get access to drugs. On a positive side, social media can be used to educate folks about the dangers of drugs, educate parents, and really serve as a public service announcement in the dangers of what's happening in the communities.
Well, that's a really good segue to our next, we want to provide a little slide here because NCAPDA is up on pretty much all the social media sites now, including TikTok. We actually have a TikTok team that has been formed, and Amina and another member of our youth ambassador program are leading, but it's really to use that platform to counterbalance or counteract those negative influences that we see on that particular technology. So anyway, yeah, great segue. These are the sites we're up on. Those who are watching this video no doubt found us through YouTube, and that's where we have a lot of the educational and lived experience interviews that we've put together over the last several months posted. So we really encourage people to go on there, learn from them, send your friends and family to them also. And then of course we have our websites and all that. So if anyone has any questions that's watching the video and wants to connect with us, here's our contact information. And then if we can move to the next slide, this is a really good reference also, the overdose response strategy at the national level. You referenced the certainly HIDTA, but also the Office of National Drug Control Policy. So this comes from the top levels of our government, and it's a great way to learn about what we're doing collectively around the country to manage this issue too. So once again, thank you so much, Mark. It's great to have you with us today, and I know this will make a difference in someone's life, and that's the purpose of it. So thank you very much for being with us, and thank you to our youth ambassadors who are so dedicated and have done a lot of work behind the scenes to put this together today. Thank you too. All right, well, we will call this a wrap. So thank you very much.